Welcome to Raw Radio.
And we are live.
And we're live.
Oh my God.
It was fun. Good times. Chris Haueter. I'm shaking in my shoes. And not just, it was just exciting. It was exciting. He's a fun, original person. One of the Dirty Dozen. If you don't know what that is, look it up. What a unique personality. What a smart guy. Who's been through a ton in his life, and I had a really good time talking to him, and I really hope we can do it again and possibly again, and maybe another time after that too, because I think he's got a lot of fun stuff to say.
Reoccurring recording. Listen, this is kind of thoughts that are on my mind immediately following the conversation with Chris. Recently, we spoke with Robert Drysdale about history of jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very intriguing conversation from a historical perspective, factual historical perspective. And then now we talk to Chris Haueter, and again, historical conversation on how things were way back in 80s, even 70s, early 80s from a jiu-jitsu perspective. And it was a very different conversation, not so factual. It was a lot of experiences. And he talked about the thing that stuck with me the most is the evolution.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
Evolution.
for sure. We always, in these takeaways, I write something down. I usually have 3 or 4. Today it was just evolution. That's all I wrote down with a couple stars next to it. And I think when you talk about, you talked about Drysdale and the factual history of BJJ, here we're getting a more philosophical history of BJJ here in the United States, at least.
Yeah.
And, this is a guy that started training well before UFC 1, before most Americans heard of BJJ. I started, when did I start? Taekwondo 89. And then by the time of the first UFC, I was doing Kung Fu. This guy had already been in BJJ, right? Not even talking about Muay Thai and all the other stuff he had done, the boxing and the street fighting and all that stuff. He had already been in it for 5 years. If you listen to the episode, I'm not going to spoil it. Listen to the episode and who he talks about training with in a garage. Like, man, unbelievable.
Most of us have watched those individuals on YouTube or on TV or on videos, kind of
or
looking up to them. And he literally trained in a garage with them, hands on, the first hand. He was with them right there. And that's mostly because academies didn't exist back then. We are talking about way back in the beginning of the 80s, even probably earlier than that. Well, excuse me. Wow, the second time.
You're so excited.
I know. There was one more thing that really struck me with a conversation with him, and he kept referring back to it. Environment is stronger than will. Yeah. I'm totally stealing this one, because I think we often talk about this, who we surround ourselves with. Surround yourselves with people you want to be like, and there's so many references in life to that quote. Sure. But he really brought it home for me. Right. The environment is stronger than I will.
Well, I was just going to say, is it nature or nurture, right? You lay down with dogs, you get up, all those cliches, but those are all rooted in fact, right? They all get their start there. He talks about when he, we'll get back to the topic of evolution. He's seen it go from garages, challenge fights, to strict sport, right? He's seen that evolution, and he's seen the branches that have come off of it over time. And he's got a really great perspective on it all. And I think, if you look back over the history of BJJ, some of that gets lost. You think about the names, you think about the fights, but you don't think about the journey and how people got from A to B to C, and how the sport has evolved. I shouldn't say the sport now. I'm not going to say the sport, but how the martial art has evolved over the years now into sport, right? Because I don't think it didn't start as sport.
Right. And he does talk about that, right? Those three, he talks about street, art, and sport, and what the differences are and how the evolution took place over time. And we're talking about decades. This is not days, weeks, months. This is decades, how all that evolved from the very, very beginning, that, as you mentioned, the garage training, to a big part of the conversation was the challenges. Right. Yeah. If you don't know what Gracie challenges are, go and look it up on YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, if you're not watching that episodes with Chris, you should be watching it. Actually, it's very visual. He shows us his combat-based garage where he trains out of. And if you ever wonder why garage not at academy, how come the Dirty Dozen black belt doesn't have his academy? Well, all that is part of that conversation and part of the evolution that he explains, how jiu-jitsu has grown over time, how it feeds into mixed martial arts, MMA, UFC, whatever, whichever format you want to present this in, and how street and art falls into this matrix of what jiu-jitsu really is.
Yeah. And what I like about the evolution, a lot of times people pick one thing, that, sport is no good because of this, or, street, why would you learn? You're never going to get in a street fight, right? Or, I don't do this to fight on the street or whatever. But he realizes the importance of all of it and how the evolution has gone over the years, and how they all intermingle still, and why it's important. The philosophy of it. If you're training just for street fights, well, your training sessions are probably going to be short. The duration of your longevity over the sport, he didn't bring this up. This is me thinking this, but your longevity over the time in the martial arts probably going to be short. On the flip side, if you're just training sport all the time, you might be get into this complacency or this thought process where once somebody drops an elbow, and I remember this from just being, messing around in martial arts as a teenager and through my early 20s and stuff, is, oh, you can't do that. Somebody would say, oh, you can't do that. What do you mean I can't do that? What are we doing here then? So if you're in this sport aspect and that's all you're thinking, and somebody drops an elbow on your eyebrow, you're going to be like, what just happened? Right. So the importance of all of it and understanding all of it and using all of it and picking up different pieces from here and there is really a great philosophical view on the evolution of it.
Well, it all kind of boils down to rules of engagement, if you will. If you're training jiu-jitsu or whatever you're training, the art of it, there's a different rules of engagement than if you were training jiu-jitsu for street. There are very different rules or very different rules of engagement if you are training for sport. And often the training should vary. Your partnership with your training partners should vary. You should be different, right? Somebody who's training for sport is going to have a probably very different response and a very different attitude than somebody who's training for the other, whether art or street or sport, whatever it is. What I'm trying to say is that you really have to understand what you're trying to achieve as a student of jiu-jitsu. And this is often visible actually on the mat, when especially in the very beginning of the journey, when students are just venturing into this huge monster of what jiu-jitsu really is. You really should understand why you're here. What is your goal? What are you trying to achieve? Is your goal become a Pan American champion? And if it is, it's great. I think that's a great goal, but your training should be very different than if you're trying to learn how to protect yourself on the street. There's a different strategies, very likely different techniques you will learn. Your attitude, your mental approach is going to be very different in both of those cases.
Yeah.
I think what often happens that we train this jujitsu kind of big bucket, and Chris talks about it quite in a very interesting way with navigating through colors and how they mix, and then where you get at the end of it, if you mix it all together, you're not walking away with anything changeable, essentially, right? What was your take on this? That was an interesting part of the conversation.
Well, I think so you have these three different aspects of it: the art aspect, the street aspect, the sport aspect. And if you can muddy the waters if you're bouncing from one to another and never really concentrating on one aspect. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't train one for a while and then go to another, because at that point now you have a clear distinction, and you can see how they're threaded together, right?
Well,
and
I think you can train both of them at the same time. There's
sure.
I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I think where I was going with the conversation is if my interest is self-defense and, let's say, street jiu-jitsu, well, for what we call it, and yours is sport, and we start having a sparring session, and I'm doing street, you doing sport, interesting things will unfold.
Probably.
So finding the rules of engagement while we training is important to maximize the success.
Yes, absolutely. So you set those parameters on week 1 to train for sport. And on week 5, you set different rules of engagement for self-defense, right? And then on week 10, you set a different set for just the pure art of it, right? I think that's, and then, so what I was talking about is then you see how those three things go together, and you can use now one to the other and back and forth. And you're clear in your head as to, oh, hey, if this was a real situation, look how I'm set up for this, right? Or if it's a sports situation, or if it's a street situation you're thinking about, and he does something, you can say, oh, wow, I can use that aspect from sport. I can apply that to a street situation, so don't be so adverse to how things are changing. Berimbolo will never work on the street. Or you got the guys that say jiu-jitsu is not a good self-defense because as you're on your back, I'd punch you in the face. Well, yeah. And I would probably control the situation to punch you on the face. You know what I mean? So learn from the evolution and all those different things and bring them together and use them. And then I don't know, is that the art part? Does that fit into the art aspect of it? It's because you're learning and adapting and making it your own, right? You're changing it to fit you, right? So is that the art? I don't know. He's too smart for me, but that's what I've gotten out of it, and how things, as they change, you need to adapt, right? If you don't, well, then are you progressing? Are you evolving, to get back to what we originally started talking about? And if you don't adapt, you don't evolve, and you get stagnant, right? You get stuck.
And that's most visible with higher belts, especially with instructors. Unfortunately, it's the evolution, continuous change, continuous growth is so important. Not only because we are supposed to be teaching others, but also to our own development. I always highly encourage to continue putting yourself in those vulnerable spots. Keep evolving, keep learning, keep finding the new things. And there's plenty of people out there who do it as well. And it's a simple collaboration of finding out of the new things.
Yeah, well,
new things. And often actually those new things are not so new. They've been done before. Often there are some new, but a lot of it has been done before, or it surrounds around the concepts that have been developed, or you might even know them. So just keeping your mind open and continue learning is a critical point of continuing the journey. What did he say at the end? Sand is leaving your glass.
The like the hourglass, the sands of time. But he came to a realization at some point that you're not going to get any of that time back. He didn't expand on that too much, but what I've started looking at is if you take judo and by comparison Brazilian jiu-jitsu, there was for me initially I thought I always thought black belt was it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a black, you're a black belt, this person's a black belt, they must know everything. But it's more apparent in judo that no, that's the launching pad for learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is when you get your black belt, now you're really it's because I look at judo a little bit like, and somebody will probably kill me for this, but karate, where it's like, now the moves, how do you apply them? Right.
Yeah. And Travis Stevens talked about this, right?
Yeah,
it's like
a little bit.
It's like black belt essentially is the acknowledgement of you knowing the basics.
Right. Yeah.
Now it's time to take it to the next level.
And
I think, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say in BJJ, I think sometimes it's so hard to get that black belt and it takes so long. And I've seen it a couple times, not too much, but I've seen it a couple times where people get it and then they think that they're done. They know it all, right? I couldn't have got here if I didn't know it all. And then they don't start accepting different things from different people, different styles, different, screw that particular group of people. I don't want to, but there's people that are starting their own things, whether it's 10th Planet or American BJJ or whatever. And other people are like, they dismiss it because they think that they're done, but they're not, they could be done, but you don't have to be. There's more to learn. There's more to get out from other people. He talked briefly about levels of black belts, which is something that, really blew my mind. Not even that long ago, where it was like, oh, I saw black belt A, who I thought was a beast, just get manhandled by black belt B. I mean, and it was like, you would think that A wasn't even a black belt. You would think that, like that guy can't be a black belt if that other dude just manhandled him like that. But it doesn't work that way because B is evolving, he's learning more. He's going and A, if he's got an open mind, can get to that level. He can keep moving up. But you
just made everybody confused by you.
Did I?
You made me confused.
You know what I'm saying?
A and B, and I know what you're saying. I know.
Do you want me to say the names? No, because I want. Well, yeah. But you get it. That there's if you keep learning, keep an open mind, and keep evolving, that what you thought when you got your black belt, you're just going to be so much better than years down the road, right?
I think for me personally, this was the deepest conversation from a historical storytelling and then just philosophy of jiu-jitsu. Chris really dug into a lot of things that I personally would think about often. So if you haven't listened to the episode, you need to listen to the episode. And then also interesting topic. Do you wash your belt? Interesting answer there, but don't say anything. Listen, but if you guys have not seen or heard, we have a little, we're trying to solve this big problem in jiu-jitsu. Do you wash your belt or not? So you should go to our website, the Roll Academy, the rollradio.com. I just plugged the wrong thing. The rollradio.com. And right on the very front page, there's a button. You can cast your vote whether you do or you do not wash your belt. We're going to be going through this all the way throughout January, and we're going to be talking about these things. But help us solve this big problem or this big debate. Well, we'll see. We'll see what it goes with the votes go which way. So anyway, shall we wrap this up?
Sure. Yeah. Keep evolving. Evolution is real, and whether you believe in it or not, it doesn't matter because it is real. And until the next one. Is that how we close this now? Until the next one?
I guess so. Off to the next one.
Off to the next one. That's it. All right. Peace.
All right. Later.
Thank you for listening to Raw Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.